Recent research in New Zealand suggests over 65s are spending up to $3,000 more than what the government superannuation scheme brings in. I'm talking with Ben Brinkerhoff in this one, head of advice with Consilium here in New Zealand. We need to endure uncertainty around investment returns, and ideally, we need to formulate a plan that considers 7 key questions, which we'll touch on today. Hope you enjoy this one, and please like and subscribe if you want to hear more about building new wealth for the new world. How do you frame the concept of risk when you're talking to investors?
What is risk? My risk view of risk is that you do not have the money you want to spend when you want to spend it. There's a risk that the money's not there when you want to spend it. Now that's very different than a concept of risk that just says price volatility, price up and down price movements. Frankly, there was a lot of price volatility in 2001. There's a lot of price volatility in 2007 and 2008. If I wasn't spending money in 2001, 2007, 2008, and I wasn't, right, personally, what does that mean for me today? Why does it matter, right? Do I have the money in my account that I want to spend when I want to spend it? That is the best view of risk. How uncertain is that? And as a project into the future, listen, if you want to just get rid of risk, take your money, put it into to a checking account at the bank. They won't pay you any interest, and as long as the bank doesn't collapse, right? And in New Zealand, that seems to have a good history of banks, being financially secure. Certainly, they're very profitable. Don't get me started on that. Then that's there's not going to be price volatility. But if you want to spend money in the future, there's some risk there that you're not going to have the money to spend when you want to spend it because your money isn't making money. Right. So that is a more mature view of risk than price volatility. Now, I don't blame people, by the way, for thinking about risk in terms of price volatility. It's very emotive, it's very instinctual. Harry Markowitz, one of my favorite guys in the world, wrote a paper about portfolio selection in which he said if you diversify, you remove some of the extra price volatility out of shares. And then he used a framework of thinking about uncertainty in prices. And then that got termed risk, price uncertainty and so that became very vernacular to think about risk in terms of prices. But it's actually tangential or maybe even irrelevant to someone who needs to spend money. Now, let me just bring the two concepts together. If in fact, I want to spend money on a very specific thing 1 year from now, okay? Then price changes, unexpected price changes, especially drops in price, could affect my ability to buy that thing next year. So if I have the money now, there or thereabouts, what I need to buy next year, I don't want to buy it now, I want to buy it next year. It is very rational for me to take that money out of an investment that has price uncertainty and put into an investment that has high price certainty because I have the money I need. I know what I'm purchasing. So I'm going to take away the risk. But what I've really done is given me certainty that I'm going to have money to buy the thing I want to buy when I want to buy it, right? But if I want to buy something in 20 years, what do I care what happens with prices next year? It doesn't matter to me at all. It matters a lot what prices will be like in 20 years' time. And there's certain investments that go up faster because I'm willing to bear the price uncertainty, which doesn't affect me because I'm not spending the money. It's a perfect trade-off. Yeah. I want to buy something from you. You want certainty in prices. I give you cash. You give me the investment. You're worried about the prices will do next year. I say, I don't care. I'm not spending the money next year. What I care about is what's going to happen in 20 years' time. He's saying, well, with any business, how do I know what's going to happen in 20 years' time? Well, that's why you don't buy one, right? You buy thousands and thousands of these businesses. You diversify away all that business-specific risk. I can be pretty confident in 20 years' time, the overall prices of businesses will rise because between now and then, businesses will produce more products and make more profits and come up with more innovations and solve more societal problems. And as a result, people will gladly pay for those services. And as exchange of people by gladly paying for those services, those businesses will be worth something, right? And that doesn't seem very risky, actually. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. So by buying something that has short-term price uncertainty, I've gotten long-term confidence that my money will grow. And so in the future, I'm going to be able to buy the things I want to buy. So actually,
Yeah.
In some ways we just framed the opposite. My willingness to take on risk, price uncertainty, lessens my risk of not having the money I want when I want to have it.
Ironic.
Right? It's ironic. And people mess that up. And so you see people, let's say they're in KiwiSaver and they're in their 30s and they've already bought their first home. So this money they're not touching it at least till 65 and potentially not at 65, sometime in the middle of their older years. 20, 30-year time horizon. They're sitting in a conservative fund. They're sitting in defensive. They're sitting in even balanced. Why? Well, I'm worried about uncertainty. Well, what risk? What risk are you talking about?
You're not spending this money.
The risk that prices fall next year? I say to them, you got it totally wrong. And they went, wait a minute, I have it wrong. No, yeah, I have 100%. You have this wrong. If prices go down next year and you're in your 30s and you're in KiwiSaver, do you know what you should be doing? You should be rubbing your hands together and thinking, sweet, I'm buying at low prices. Is that not rational? Like if you're in KiwiSaver in your 30s and you're employed, you're buying. Every 2 weeks, you buy. Prices fall. You're a buyer. Buyers should like low prices. Yeah. You're better off. They're thinking, oh, wait a minute. You mean if prices go down, I win? Oh, yeah, that's what it means to be the buyer. It's like walking into Briscoe's and being disappointed there's a sale, right? It is. Who does that? Only people who invest in KiwiSaver. So is that risk? Is it really? Because I can tell you that based on a lot of financial history, that in 20 or 30 years' time, a growth fund is going to do better than a balanced fund and better than a conservative or defensive fund. So you're going to have more money to spend when you want to spend it. That should be reducing your risk. So it's just these ways you think about it. Now, I'm obviously talking from a perspective of a diversified portfolio, not simply buying a single company. Any company can go out of business. I'm not buying a business. When I buy a diversified portfolio, I'm buying business in general. Any business can go out of business, but business itself tends to not go out of business. So I've diversified away all that, but a fancy word, idiosyncratic, specific risk. I'm not talking about that situation. I'm talking about someone buying a diversified portfolio.
I always wondered about this. So the source of the belief that risk equals volatility, can you just cover that a little bit more?
So I met Harry Markowitz.
Right.
He's passed away since. I met him in 2007, I believe, 2008. He was on the investment committee of the business I used to work for in the States.
Okay.
And we went down to San Diego. He taught at the Rady School of Business at UC San Diego, which was my alma mater. I never had him as a professor, but that's where he taught. And we went down and had lunch with him, and we had a great conversation. And he was, at that time, he was in his late 80s, I believe, and he was incredibly sharp, and it was just fascinating to see. Still working, and an amazing man, actually. And he had the idea in the 1950s, and no one ever thought of it, is to not think about a investment in terms of what a single investment can do in terms of getting high returns. People before him and books were written on how do I select an investment? Well, I simply find the investment I think that's going to give me the highest return and I buy it. Of course, you follow that logic through, then you should take your very, very, very best idea, whatever that idea is, and you should put all your money on that one idea because, of course, that has the highest potential payoff. And intuitively, that doesn't sound very smart. But what he showed is that if you buy a portfolio of investments, many shares, not just one specific one, that you get about the same expected return, but you are far more certain to get it. And that became known as the free lunch. To get the same thing on expectation, but to be far more certain of getting it seems like a good idea. And how do I measure how certain I am to get it? Well, he uses a concept called standard deviation, which is just the range of potential outcomes an investment can have relative to its mean or average. And he uses that as a way of measuring certainty. If something at a high standard deviation, it means it can really do a wide variety of outcomes are possible, right? If it has a low standard deviation, that means only a few or a much narrower range of potential outcomes are possible. If you're going to offer me two outcomes, and one is a huge range of what could potentially happen, and one has a smaller range of what can potentially happen, but on average, I get the same thing, I'm taking the one with the smaller range, right? Because, the upside's good, but the downside could be devastating.
Yeah,
So,
right.
so what he says, he called that risk, and I'm minimizing it. If I buy this diversified portfolio, I'm not losing anything, but I'm minimizing the uncertainty, the risk. And so that started the vernacular of risk being about this price uncertainty issue.
Interesting. Right.
And it's not wrong insofar as what he was doing. It was a great step up in investment science, and there's been others since. By the way, it didn't stop there. It's a field that continues to evolve and grow. But I don't think it's the right way to think about it for your listeners.
Well, I agree, and I would go so far as to say that calling volatility risk or implying that it's an interchangeable word actually sends some sort of subconscious signal to a lot of investors where they end up treating their investments as if they are going to the casino because they do view it as a game of chance. Yeah. And I think that what you're saying before is interesting because I guess it lifts the game when you simplify complicated concepts to deliver to a broader range of people. It's definitely a step in the right direction. But just like diversification, it narrows the range of possible outcomes within an investor's world, right? Because you're removing the possibility that with some investors that are receiving that message, they end up shying away from the very best returns of all, very best returns they can get because they've been told that if it changes in price over a relative short period of time, that it's bad.
When they weren't going to spend it anyway.
Exactly.
That's the critical thing. They weren't going to spend it anyway. And in fact, if they're a net buyer, I mean, they're buying every 2 weeks in KiwiSaver,
accumulating.
Price volatility is their friend.
Exactly.
Because if the prices go down, they buy at lower prices. And they never thought like, gee, I'm a buyer. I like sales.
Yes.
Right. The one who don't like sales are the sellers. And by the way, when you are about to sell something, volatility is not really your friend. But that's why you should work with an advisor who's recognized that and has put you in a portfolio of some things that aren't very volatile. And if prices go down, you sell the stuff that's not volatile. It's very intuitive, right? Yeah. The stuff that's volatile that went down a lot, well, you just leave that alone. Don't sell that. It's on sale, right? Yes, sell the stuff that didn't go down very much or even went up.
Yeah.
And that an advisor should be working with someone to help them navigate those choices.
Obviously, you're in the advice industry, so am I. So that's some people who are listening going, well, of course you're going to say that, right? But I think let's just remove the fact that it's a qualified person that might be financially benefiting by giving you that advice and replace it with somebody who's just not you.
See,
there's the starting point, right? Like you could just say, hey, it's just somebody that's objective is the start.
Yeah. I'm a capitalist philosophically. Maybe not as much socialist and definitely not a communist. And so I don't mind there being incentives in place for people to do the job well. So often fees are delivered for no value. And
Sure.
and if your listeners are saying, I don't like fees, well, God bless you. You shouldn't unless you're getting value, right? You probably don't mind paying an attorney more if they are a specialist in the kind of field of law that you need expertise in. You probably don't mind paying a surgeon more or an accountant more. We had a conversation on that earlier over lunch. So no one has a problem of paying more for value. The issue in our field is people often pay and don't get value, and that's a problem.
Sure. Yeah.
And people need to be discerning, and not all advisors are the same. They offer differentiated value. And in our industry, I think too many people make promises they don't deliver on. And the promises take advantage of people's overconfidence.
Sure.
People promise, I know what the next year's winning share is going to be. I know what next year's losing share is going to be. I'm going to get you out of the market before it goes down and in the market before it goes up. I'm going to time these things. I'm going to speculate. These are activities that do happen. They are not value adding as a whole. There are winners and losers, of course, but if I net them out, I get back to where I've started minus fees. And that's happened so much. People are rightly going, did I really get value here? And I just want your listeners to know that not all advisors operate in that level. And there is a huge amount of value they can bring to you, not only with constructing a portfolio that makes sense for your circumstances, but also with navigating your financial journey. So at every point in time of life, that the choices you're making are sensible relative to what you value and what's important to you. Mm-hmm. And that person you can trust to bounce things off of to ensure that's true. There's lots of value add out there, but you don't necessarily get it just because you're paying a fee.
So paying a higher fee doesn't necessarily imply that you're going to get the best returns. It just means that you're going to be paying a higher fee.
That's right. So I think it's okay to be discerning, and it's okay to be skeptical, and put it to a financial advisor to show you that they're adding value.
Yeah.
And if they're not, then make a decision to try something else.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
And I guess what I'm saying is, and you can call me out if this just sounds a little bit too idealistic, but even if you just talk to somebody who wasn't you, all of a sudden you're getting another perspective anyway, right? Absolutely. And if that someone that you're talking to is actually qualified to do the job really well, you're probably more likely to get better outcomes over the long term, but it's not necessarily going to be evident in the short term.
I have a financial advisor. You can't see your own blind spots, can you? I can't see where ego is getting in the way of smart, carefully thought through choices. I can't see where fears are getting in the way of carefully thought through choices. I can't see where I'm making a choice that's actually not in my wife's interest, but I'm just not giving her voice, right? How do I see those things?
Good point.
Right?
Yeah.
You need someone objective that you can trust to help you navigate those things, to make sure that her voice matters just as much as my voice, even though I'm the one who intuitively is more attracted to making financial decisions.
Yeah.
I need to ensure that I haven't just continued to double down and double down and double down on something that's working because it's making me feel good, even though it's now in contradiction to what I actually said I really wanted and valued. So yeah, and these things cannot be discovered, Darcy, without trust.
Yeah.
How would someone know that unless they knew me, unless they knew my wife, unless they had a relationship with us, and unless they actually had a discussion with me about what I truly value, what I care about, my relationship with my kids, how do I want to spend money on them, about my career, how do I want to navigate my career journey relative to my savings, and should I be saving more and giving myself more options for the future? I'll give you an example. Examples are good. I sat down with an advisor, not even my advisor. Right. And he was just asking me he's talking about questions you ask during meetings with clients. And I got asked the question, I'm 45 years old. So he said, if your 50-year-old self was telling your 45-year-old self what to think about money, what would he say? What would your 50-year-old self tell your 45-year-old self? I went, oh, he'd say, stop worrying about money. Because my 50-year-old self is going to have 4 kids about to leave home. My son will be 22. My twin daughters will be 21. My youngest daughter will be 19. They'll be launching their lives. Like, they're all responsible. They're all great kids. And the time frame that we had to do things as a family will in large part have come and gone. And what if I was saving money, not spending it, because I was saving for what? For retirement? Like, I need to maximize life now. I need to take the holidays now, right? I need to spend money now. I'll be fine in 5 years' time. That's what my 50-year-old self was telling me in my head. It's like, you're going to be fine. These 5 years are critical. Double down saving between 50 and 55, but spend money now. And so for me, what that meant is stop paying down the mortgage so fast. I'm already paying it down way faster than I need to, right? Spend the money. Spend it on memories and experiences, and on treats for the kids or other things. I couldn't see it. Now, if you have a financial advisor that makes you think about things that carefully so that you prioritize your choices appropriately and get you out of your own ego fear cycle, then you have someone worth holding on to. And they're worth way more than you're paying them, whatever you're paying them, right? If you have someone that tells you, hey, next year you should buy this company or that company or this stock or that stock or this share or that share, because I think it's, that's not it. That's
a stockbroker from like the 80s.
That value proposition is come and gone, in my view.
Yeah. How many families can you send to Disneyland? That's a good success metric right there, right?
There you go. Yeah. Right. So
no, that's good. I think that a lot of people do have anxiety around their future, and they take more risk than they ought to. And by risk, I mean uncertainty, because they think they have to build a lot more than what they really need to.
Okay.
And partly because they don't have a plan. So there are 7 questions, and if people get this right, then whether they get advice or whether they just do it themselves, they're probably going to be in a better position. So starting with the first one, the first question to ask yourself if you want to avoid retirement poverty is, how much do you have to invest now?
If any business owner who owns stock needs to look at the stock, look at the goods on the shelf and say, what do I have? Right? You're not going to open up your store and I don't know what's on the shelf. I don't know if it's any good. I don't know what value it is. I got to take an inventory, right? So this is just an inventory question. What do I have to work with? What is deployable? What cash, term deposits, equity in my home, Kiwi Saver, what assets do I have or will I have to answer life's questions? Questions like, well, can I care for myself in my old age at a standard of living I'm happy with? Can I be generous with my children and do something special for them? Can I become financially independent so that my job becomes more choice than obligation, or I can focus on doing only those things that I enjoy and or work the hours I'm willing to work. Life's questions. To answer those questions, I got to know what I have to work with.
Sure.
I got to do an inventory, and I can't really, I don't want to hide anything. I need to assess what it's at, right?
Sure.
Is there anything deployable towards those objectives?
Yeah.
And if there's not, that's an answer. At least I know that.
Yeah.
And then I can work from there.
So in other words, you're opening up the pantry. What ingredients do we have to cook with?
Exactly.
Which I guess kind of leads nicely into the next question, which is, when will you start spending the money that you want to invest, or when will you start consuming it, right?
I kind of frame this as, what age do I want to be financially independent? Retirement's a loaded word.
Yeah.
I don't even know how I feel about the word. Like, I go hot and cold on it, to be honest.
Yeah. It's like risk and volatility, right? It's a bit of nuance.
But I do want to know the age of financial independence. Essentially, it's the age in which I could, if I chose to, earn as little income as I want. Or another way of thinking about it is, I could go into the boss's office and say, thank you very much. I appreciate all the years we've worked together. I'm goodbye. I'm not saying I would. I'm just saying I can. And by the way, being able to do that, good feeling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what age do we want that to occur?
Yeah.
Because if you really enjoy your work, and your work allows you a lot of autonomy, and a lot of people have jobs like that, we can push out that. Let's say that someone says, listen, I don't need to be there till I'm in my 70s. I love what I'm doing. It's only really, so now I now have an insurance issue, just ensuring you that if something stops you from working, you're okay. So, that's an insurance question. But I also know I don't need to save that much, because I only need to start spending from somewhere in my 70s till, in my 80s, or if I get lucky into my 90s. So, but if someone says I want to do that in my 50s, well, my need to save and the amount to save increases.
Sure.
So people say, I don't know the answer, Darcy. Well, you don't need to know. You just, I want you to intuit an answer. What's your intuitive answer? If we can't get there, we'll deal with that later. But I need to know what feels comfortable and good to you so we can work towards some ideals, even if ideals are not achievable.
Setting a waypoint. Yeah. Right. Number 3, how much can you save? Or presumably this means how much can you invest along the way, right?
Absolutely. Okay, how much can I save? So you don't know the answer to that question. That's fair enough, right? What are you saving now as a start? Okay. You have excess income. Are we deploying that against your mortgage? Are we putting that in KiwiSaver? If we're putting it in KiwiSaver, should we? Because that's locked up. Or do we have a situation where we have a couple, and one of them's on one income and the other one is on a different income, and that's on a different tax level? So if I deploy the savings via them, they're the saver. I've saved myself significant tax. So it's really thinking about that question. A lot of people are spending. Do you ever find it, Darcy, that your lifestyle got a bit of a bump because maybe you got a raise or your earnings increased from year to year, and lo and behold, you thought that you were good, but all of a sudden and it was like, and the money, it just seemed to get spent. I don't know what happened, right? Somehow your lifestyle just went whoop right up with it. If that's happened, has that happened to you?
Oh yeah, spending and expenditure.
You're supposed to be asking me questions, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
Hey, you can be my advisor.
Right.
That's cool.
That's that episode. Put Darcy under the mic. I'll ask you the questions. I love it.
Fair enough.
Do that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So that's very normal.
Yeah.
So this question is also a commitment to ourselves, saying, if we don't intercede, that will happen. There's a cost to that. Is that cost? Are we willing to bear that cost relative to what we actually want to achieve otherwise, strategically? If not, then we ensure that when we get the raise, we pause. You put extra money towards what needs extra money. That you think, okay, this is my opportunity now to accelerate some of the objectives I had about financial independence, et cetera. So it's conscientious. So it's really a combination of those kind of things.
Yeah, and I guess it's probably pretty hard for people to do that when they don't have a baseline around their cash flow. Like if they haven't actually done a budget, and I know it feels like, do I really have to do a budget? But often that is the first thing that you kind of need to be able to understand what is able to be done, right?
Yeah, confession time. I hate them.
You haven't done a budget.
I hate budgets. I hate them. So, but do I know generally how much money goes into different activities, and do I try to be intentional about that? Yes. Do I have an account that money goes to pay for bills? That, listen, when every 6-month bill shows up, like insurance bill or the once a quarter rates bill shows up, I know there's money in that account because although I get paid every 2 weeks, I'm going to fund that account ahead of time, knowing that bill's coming, right? So I'm going to fund it almost as if I'm paying it every 2 weeks, so that when it comes, it's there. Yes, because I really don't like the feeling of getting one of those big bills and then going, I didn't fund that, and now what do I have to take money out of an account that, I don't like going away from my family trip and going, there's no money for flights. I don't like that feeling. So every 2 weeks, a little money goes into an account for those kind of activities.
Yeah.
So I hate budgeting, but I hate that feeling more, right? So, but the real budgeting I do is the budgeting by default, meaning that almost decide ahead of time. This is what I want to save. I'm going to spend everything else, and the money goes immediately out of the account. It goes into something that's invested. I never see it. I don't think about spending it. I don't worry about spending it, and so I've saved, but I haven't really
You've conditioned
thought,
your cash flow.
I don't save after I spent all the other things. I save first, and then I spend everything else. That's probably the most effective method for me.
Hey, so we've covered how much can you save or how much can you set aside in an ongoing manner. And then the next question to consider would be, how much do you want to spend? So presumably that means today and tomorrow, right? How much do you want to
Yeah.
spend at different life cycle stages, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And people struggle with this. This is an area, it's an intimidating question anyways. I mean, 45, as I mentioned earlier, uh, I have no idea what I want to spend in my early years of retirement. I know enough to know I want to spend more in my early years than my later years, right? Because I'd want to spend when I had health.
Yeah.
So not knowing means I just want to punt that down the road. Here's the thing: you don't need to know. So you sit down with a financial advisor, or you even do it yourself. You say, okay, what comes into my my account after taxes are paid every month or every 2 weeks or whatever it is, and then say, okay, once I've paid for everything in my life, do I feel like I have enough? Is that enough? Or I feel tight? I feel tight. Okay. Well, between now and when I retire, what might be different? Well, a couple things. A lot of money going to the kids. Well, if I was spending that, I'd probably feel like I was flush, right? And I have a mortgage, so I'm not going to have that at that point in time. And so I start to just consider, okay, well, I'm not going to have a mortgage because I'm going to whack that off. I don't really need to have that money anymore. I'm not going to take a lot of money for the kids here. I'm like, okay. And then what you kind of get is like, this is what I actually spend on me, right? Me and my partner. Does that feel comfortable? Do I feel like, gee, I really have a more than enough here? No. Okay. Well, we'll take that number and bump it up a little bit, right? And now I have a sense of, if I gave you an extra $1,000 just for you, right? Would that? Oh yeah, I probably do good. Okay. Well, then now I at least have a basis, right? So people having an intuition about this, and you can use that to get a sense, and then you just say, well, that's what I need every 2 weeks or every month, and multiply by the appropriate number to kind of get to an annual. And then of that, you're thinking, it's not hard to estimate what government super will be worth, NZ super.
Yeah.
But we figure that out, and then you have a net amount. Like, well, that's what I'm going to need to cover, right? So now that's not the right answer, but it's a way more narrowed down than I have no idea. Because if you have no idea, you also do something else that's quite negative, is you punt your responsibility to do something about it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
So what I'm doing, as soon as I have a number, I'm saying, gee, that's $47,000 a year plus whatever, I'm going to get from NZ Super. So, let's say I have a specific number there, and that takes me up to a total spending amount. $47,000 a year feels like what am I going to do about that number? Yeah. Relative to, I have no idea. I can think about this later.
Exactly. And I think that's we're touching on this indirectly, that if we don't have perfection, that's okay. Have something. It's a draft. It's a waypoint. It's something you aim at. It's something you refine. You get higher resolution as you go. Yeah. But questions like how, when, and what, they invoke this pressure to come up with something specific and get it right the first time. And I think for some personalities, if they can't be exact, they don't want to touch it. But this is where you have to be a little bit okay to kind of wade into the gray, right?
Most people underestimate how much wealth they'll accumulate between their mid 50s and their early 60s. Mm-hmm. Generally because, financial good fortune happens. And that can come in the form of an inheritance or other things along those lines. Their home, which was fine for a family, is now too big. They need to downsize. They find by downsizing, they can free up. They don't want to take care of the yard anymore. But you know what? There's another family out there that really would love a yard for their family. So they're willing to pay the premium for the yard, where for you, it's a liability, right? And so there's going to be some financial good fortune that happens. If you're talking with an advisor, they can kind of get a sense of those things. Yeah. If you can't figure out how you're going to fund that amount now, it doesn't matter. Yeah. What matters is that now when you get, let's say that you get that inheritance next year, and it could be under tragic circumstances and a little bit traumatic. And so you're a bit stressed under the whole circumstance of it. But the money has arrived, and you think to yourself, oh, I'm going to go buy this. I'm going to upgrade my car or whatever else. And it's like, well, if you had defined your goal of the $47,000 a year in our example, and the money came in, I know that I wasn't saving enough to get there. We'd already established that, but we're starting. Now the money comes in. Now I think to myself, should I really upgrade the car or other things, or should I use some of this to fund this shortfall that I already identified I have? So now I have a lot more nuanced discussion. Because why? Because I went through the somewhat difficult process of understanding that this is what I want to spend for lifestyle. Yeah. So now I know I have a need. Yeah. So now my decisions are wiser. They're more nuanced. This is where this process leads. And it leads to hopefully making decisions that feel like they're aligned with your long-term intentions.
Yeah. So another question, which is going to be hard for some people to really grasp, especially because it has something to do with death. And already that's something that we don't like to really think about too much. But how long do you plan on spending the money for? In other words, when are you going to die? Is probably the more blunt question to ask, right?
Not an easy question, is it?
When are you going to die, Ben? Do you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's not easy.
It's tough, right? Like, so I think about that.
Would I want to err on the side of longevity? Yes. Does erring on the side of longevity mean I have to oversave? Yes. Do I ever, even in my late 90s, want to be a burden to my children? No. I'd want to be able to financially care for myself, even if living with them was the right choice. Then, so I don't know. But fortunately, ever since, you remember Halley's Comet? You ever heard of Halley's Comet?
Yeah, I remember 1986. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you know Halley's Comet, obviously named after the mathematician Halley from the UK, right? And I forget his first name, like Thomas or William. He measured when he thought this comet would return, and lo and behold, he was right. But another thing he did was he figured out the life expectancy of his town he lived in England. And upon having real life expectancy data, and he was, I think, the first one to do it, they could start creating life insurance. You can't develop life insurance without life expectancy. So from that point on till now, life expectancy has been something that's been pretty carefully monitored. So at least we're in a situation where we have data. So at least we can start there. I think life expectancy, sounds like a 50-50 chance I live longer. Yeah, right? So that might not be comfortable. So let's push out a little bit. There's a benefit, though, to this that a good advisor will bring up with an investor. People think, let's say I plan to 100. Okay, plan to 100. That's longer than expected, but we can do that. And if that makes you feel comfortable, then that's the right choice. It means we'll have to save more, because I got to plan on you spending money when you're probably not going to be spending money because you'll have passed away. So I have to save for those years I'm probably not going to spend. But we can do that, and that could be a good choice. However, anyone who's had parents live into their 90s understands that you just don't spend as much money as you think you're going to spend. So you don't spend at the same level as you spent in your 60s. You just don't replace the roof. You don't replace the car, and you don't take the holidays. You spend more on healthcare to be sure, right? You're not going out to Bunnings and making endless trips and doing these things. So you don't spend as much as you think you are. There's actually good data on this. So you can plan on life expectancy, but if you plan on appropriate spending amounts, it doesn't have to cost what you think it's going to cost. So this is ultimately a question of comfort. Let's talk about a number that makes you feel comfortable, that is beyond what you think is probable. And it's also a number you get to update. So guess what? You're talking to a client, they're in their mid-80s. They're in great health. Now, luckily, we have NZ Super. That'll keep on paying you till you die. And that's not a bad whack, right? And so what you do is you update this. Like, okay, well, things are going better. maybe we should plan for a little bit more life expectancy.
Yeah.
You don't have to make dramatic changes, subtle changes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so you don't have to you have to figure that out in your 40s. You get to adjust as you go if your health turns out the way you're hoping.
Yeah. Number 6, 2 more to go. How much investment risk will you take? So this kind of ties back to where we started, right?
It does.
It's an important question.
Use the word risk, by the way.
Yeah. Well,
Like
that's just because I wrote it down.
You can't even help yourself.
I know.
Darcy,
that's why I said, like last week, I'm just as guilty as everybody else for perpetuating this word crime.
It's an easy word, right?
Yeah, it is. So yeah, how much volatility should we accept when we invest, Ben?
If we're saving regularly, probably quite a lot. I hate those questions that say, how much are you willing to lose until you feel uncomfortable? Because it almost
the focus is on the negative, right? It's on the loss for a start.
And beyond that, that's the whole, like, you haven't, but I'm here. I'm your advisor, right? So yeah, you'd feel uncomfortable. So, right. I'm meant to sit between you and the big mistake. Right. And that's part of my job. So if you're buying regularly and prices are low, you're better off. If you want to sell, you call your advisor and you get some sound judgment and wisdom on this to ensure that very likely, wisely, you don't. Now, if you told your advisor you need to spend some of this money in the short term, there should be a portion of your investments that are not nearly so volatile already. And you can that money should be allocated and there and available to you in something that didn't lose 30%. Part of an advisor's job is that if you felt uncomfortable, to ensure you still acted wisely. But those questionnaires, they don't ever anticipate that. It should be, at what level would you call your advisor so he could talk you out of doing something stupid? Now that would be a better question, maybe. And by the way, you're not going to sell. Now I understand there's people that don't understand investments very well and for which these things feel very spooky. So it's worthwhile and it pays dividends to get a bit of investment education. Your advisor should be willing to sit down with you and educate you on markets enough that you think, do you know what? I get it.
Yeah.
I get that if I buy a diversified portfolio, it's not going to go out of business.
Yeah.
I understand that I'm not going to have a permanent loss in a diversified portfolio. I can understand that they always come back and have done. I can understand that there's a time frame on average that takes, and I've accounted for that. I can understand that I'm buying. If I buy at low prices, I'm better off. Or if I'm in the process of selling down a portfolio, I have a portion of my portfolio that doesn't have that volatility that I can live on for a number of years while markets recover. So, so what I'm saying is I think people sell themselves short here because they take easy online questionnaires and they don't get real advice.
Actually, one question on that. Let's say that, we've talked about this concept of making sure that the amount of money that you plan on spending immediately, there probably shouldn't be too much volatility attached to that portion of money.
Yep.
Maybe it's a savings account, laddered term deposit structure, or a bond fund, something like that.
Lots of different ways to do it.
Yeah. So let's say there's a bucket. We'll call that a bucket.
Sure.
And then the other bucket would be the money that you're going to need over a slightly longer time frame.
Sure.
And there might be a bit more uncertainty with the returns on that. Every year, let's say, or twice a year, maybe you rebalance.
Yep.
Typically, if you're trying to stick to certain percentages. But when you consider markets are volatile, what is best practice when it comes to filling up the bucket that's going to be spent in the short term versus staying invested for a little bit longer and letting that bucket run a little bit lower, waiting for markets to potentially recover?
It's a good question, and we probably need a whole episode on it.
Okay.
What I'd like you to consider, Darcy, is that spending your investments when they are down is probably not a good idea. So if one question you might ask someone is, how many years of spending would you like to have available to you in investments that are very stable? Not perfectly stable, but very stable. They say 3, 4, 5, and I can show them all the recessions since 1900 or since World War II, whatever time frame, all the recessions, what they were, how long they were, how long they took to recover in a global portfolio, right? Or a portfolio that resembles what I'm going to be putting you in. And, given all this history of how many recessions we've had and market drops and the average time to recover, or maybe the different recovery times, how many years do we want to have, And, and therefore, if prices are down, just spend that down. Just spend that down. Don't sell something that's down. That's why you have the stable portion of your portfolio, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to do it. That's not the only way. This is quite an evolved topic, and there's people that have different methods and approaches.
Yeah.
But you definitely should be framing, if you're in the portion of your life where you're spending your money, you should have a strategy for what happens if things go wrong.
Yes.
Right. And you should demand it. You should say to your advisor, all well and good, this graphic you showed me that I'm going to just hit zero balance on the date I hit 90, right? That's great, right? What happens? What's your strategy if things go wrong? What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How are you going to steer the ship if we hit a storm? It's a very valid question, and the advisor should have an answer.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. And this last question, in terms of question you should ask yourself to avoid being poor in retirement, what do you want to leave to others? Do you want to spend everything before you drop dead, like what we said before, or leave the kids a bunch of money that they probably can't handle?
Is that optimal for them? Yeah. Have you achieved, what are you trying to achieve by giving? I want to give them $1 million. Why? Because my parents left me money and it was significantly helpful. Okay. Would it have helped if you got that money sooner?
Probably.
But I can't give that money sooner because if I give it to Jane, John's going to want more. And John, and so what I'm really doing is I'm saying I'm dead. I don't have to deal with the kids squabbling. So that's why objective, right, is to give them in a way that I don't have to deal with the squabbling. Is there a way we can give and deal with squabbling? Would you like to see the benefit that brings your grandkids? Would you like your kids to be able to move into a district where they can send their kids to the kind of school that you went to growing up? Like what matters to you? And when do we make that happen? And do you get to see it? Do you get to give with a cold hand? Do you get to give with a warm hand? Right? Do you want to give to a charity? Well, giving to a charity, the only people that are happy when you give to a charity when you've died is not the charity, it's the IRD. Because you give the money to a charity when you died, there's no tax benefit whatsoever. People say, I don't want tax benefits, charitable. Well, then take the refund and give that to the charity, right? Give them more money if that's your objective.
I see what you're saying. So give while you're alive, not when you're dead.
Give away, yeah. And also, if you leave the money in your will, I'm not an estate planning attorney, so disclaimer. But you give the money away in your will, it can be contested. And if it is contested, a lot of charities will just say back out and say, no, that's not interested. But you can actually give that money away while you're alive, or you can put into a trust that can give that money away when you've died. There's lots of ways, and that way it can't be contested anyway.
Yeah.
So this is an evolved question. People as the older they get, the more they're super interested in this. But even when they're beginning to think about this, if they have an intention to leave a lot of wealth to the next generation, it does need to be thought about. That may mean saving more. That may mean aggressively investing. That may be delaying your own retirement. Like if I'm going to prioritize giving money away to the next generation, its implications on all the other choices I make.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. How much do you have to invest now? When will you start spending the portfolio on a net basis? How much can you save? How much do you want to spend? How long do you plan on spending? How much investment risk or volatility will you take? And what would you like to leave others in your estate? Any final words of wisdom that you want to share with those who are just starting the journey of thinking about their retirement? And let's just define retirement as the time in the future where you could optionally stop working. Not that you would. Yeah, financial independence. Yeah.
Let's be real. Almost no one's going to do this. You actually need to be guided through this. This is a process you go through with someone that has done it before and can take your values and mix it with their experience and give you give you direction that feels comfortable. I mean, there's going to be some people out there that do this, but I feel like all this is intimidating.
Yeah, it was like
Don't be intimidated.
midwife. Yeah.
Go find an advisor. Even if you decide not to go ahead with them, at least you've now gone through the process of thinking about it. There's some advisors will just write a plan for you and then let you go, and you decide whether you want to implement to them or not.
Yeah.
That's probably really worthwhile getting some direction on this.
Yeah.
But it by no means is it impossible to do it yourself. It's just difficult.
Yeah. I'm sure you could give birth by yourself. You could, well, I don't know about you. I certainly can't, but I know at least half the population definitely can, unless you're from California. You're not from California, are you?
I am.
Okay, my apologies. But if you were doing this by yourself, you're probably going to learn a lot, right? And it might be really enjoyable for you as well. Like, let's put that out there, that some people really enjoy taking control of their retirement and managing it through to completion.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah, you're going to need a midwife, maybe an obstetrician. You might need a little bit of medical intervention every now and then, right? But where are some really good places that you can point people if they don't like the sound of my voice or my style and they want to talk to somebody about their retirement?
So I like non-institutionalized advice personally.
Why is that?
Because institutionalized advice is problematic insofar as the person giving you the advice is paid by the solution they're recommending.
Sure.
And that has all sorts of problems. It doesn't have to be problematic. It just often is.
Sure.
So
banks and I
like independent advisors.
Sure.
I don't want my accountant to work for Xero. I want them to use Xero, right?
Nice. Yeah.
So I don't want my doctor to work for Pfizer, but I wouldn't mind him recommending Pfizer if he thought that was the best medication for me. So I like independent advisor. Darcy, if you don't know, is an independent advisor. There are others, and a good place to find them is we have a website that does KiwiSaver with independent advisors, and there's a whole bunch of advisors listed there, and they're good ones. Yeah. That is www.kiwirap, and RAP is spelled WRAP, KiwiRap, one word. .co.nz. There's Find an Advisor. There's a lot of advisors all over the country there as well. So that's a place you can go.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. As usual, Ben, always really enlightening. I get a lot of positive feedback whenever you come on the show. So Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.